everyone, and welcome back to Red Brick Recap. This is episode number 16, and it is our first of 2025. Ted, Happy New Year. We made it to 2025. How are you feeling? How was your New Year's?
Happy New Year indeed. New Year, same us. Same podcast, of course. No, we ain't leaving everybody high and dry. But New Year's was good. Started it off yesterday with a polar plunge, and I put that in quotations because I am in Florida.
Oh.
So it was the air temperature yesterday was a balmy 53 degrees. The pool temperature was 61, so it was cold, but not as cold as being in Chicago. So, but yeah, New Year's was good. How about yourself?
Yeah, not too crazy. Just hung out with the family. We got to go to the Winter Classic over at Wrigley, so I had a ton of fun watching my Blackhawks lose to the Blues. Pretty bad performance there. Chicago media has not been too kind to the Chicago Blackhawks for the last couple of days since then, as rightfully so, because, I mean, you can't get blown out 6-2 on home ice and expect to, have the media treat you well. But other than that, it was a good time. I had some friends visit it, so good way to ring in the new year. Also going on through this new year, we had a bunch of really cool college football games. College football playoff is now in full swing. Ted, what was your immediate reaction to some of the games we saw this during the last couple of days?
Immediate reaction, they got to figure out how to reseed these teams, man. I mean, outside of the Arizona State Texas game last night, which, oh my goodness, was that an incredible game to watch. That is everything that the college football playoff is designed to be. It's designed to have those close matches, and I mean those are probably the two teams that were seeded perfectly. You can make an argument that Texas should have been 4, Arizona State could have been 5, but that's semantics, really. But those two teams were seeded perfectly. Everybody else, I mean, it was a bloodbath. I mean, SMU gets slaughtered by Penn State. Indiana gets slaughtered by Notre Dame. So they got to, and I mean, Boise State put up kind of a fight against Penn State, but not really. I saw some tweet the other day, and it's like, if James Franklin is winning games with Penn State, you got too many playoff games.
Yeah, right.
So I have enjoyed watching some of the games. I'm excited for tonight's Sugar Bowl game. Of course, was postponed to today. Our thoughts and prayers with everybody down in New Orleans. But yeah, I'm excited to see what happens tonight. I know Tim Daniel, Big Tim, is rooting for Notre Dame. I will not be rooting for Notre Dame, so sorry, Tim. But yeah, it should be. I'm looking forward to how they continue to progress the college football playoff in the coming years. But I will say this: I am really happy that Alabama lost to Michigan the other day, with Michigan having maybe like 25 players in the portal.
Yeah,
because I was really tired of this SEC hypothetical.
Yeah, the SEC being undefeated against hypothetical teams finally came to an end. Love that. Shout out everyone who's been banging the drum for the SEC. They look like morons now. That fires me up. The one thing I do want to talk about real quick before we jump into Miami of Ohio, Ohio State looks like a wagon. Whew. They look so good. And I mean, I'm an Ohio State fan, so I might be a little biased. But after the Michigan game, my expectations for this team were so low. They were at the bottom of what they could have been. I was fully expecting us to lose at home to Tennessee. And now 2 games in a row, we've looked dominant against really, really good football teams. So that's going to be a team I think can really put up a fight against Texas. I mean, if I was a betting man, my money would be on the Buckeyes, even though the game is in Texas. I think that's going to be a crazy game to watch. And then the national championship, it really just depends on who comes out that side of the bracket. If it's Georgia, my confidence is very low. If it's Penn State or Notre Dame, my confidence is high.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. I am like a quasi Ohio State fan. My girlfriend's family is Ohio State fans, so they've kind of roped me into it all. But as a pretty unbiased perspective, having watched both the Oregon Ohio State games this year, the first one was sometime in October, I think. Will Howard did not look as complete as he did last night in the Rose Bowl.
Right.
And for college football purists, having a Pac-12 team and a Big Ten team meet in the Rose Bowl, chef's kiss. But Ohio State, they are going to play as well as Will Howard is going to take them. I think you have the playmakers on the outside and Emeka Egbuka and Jeremiah Smith. You have Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins. But the defense is always good. The defense has always been really good this year. But it really is, how far is Will Howard going to take them? Because you saw in the loss to Oregon, he didn't play particularly great, and then he had that one big flub at the end of the game where he slides down with no time. Which I will say, the whole penalty right before the clock malfunction that kind of screwed Ohio State. But still, like, Will Howard did not have his best game by any means. Last night, whatever they were doing with Will Howard, whatever was said to him, he looked on another level.
Yeah.
So, here's the thing. I think it's probably going to be, I would put my money on Georgia, winning tonight. But if Will Howard is playing like that, I don't think there's any team remaining that can stop him. Because, look, it's not like Texas looked great yesterday too. It was 24-3, and then all of a sudden it's 24-24, and you're like, well, what the heck?
Yeah, I think it depends on how fast they start. In both the Tennessee game and the Oregon game, it was 21-0 within 10 minutes. And I think it was within 5 minutes last night. So it really depends on who starts that game fast. But I don't want to spend too much time talking about Ohio State and every other team when we are a Miami podcast. So let's talk about Miami's bowl game, the Arizona Bowl. That was the most fun I've had watching a Miami bowl game ever. That was the best bowl experience I think that we've seen for a Miami team in our time as Miami students, at least. Obviously, we were too young to remember like the mid-2000s bowl games, and obviously we probably weren't watching them because before we came to Miami. But yeah, the Arizona Bowl, I think they did an excellent job of fan engagement, just keeping it fun, keeping it lighthearted, even though it was a competitive game at times. Miami just looked dominant, but we'll get to that in a second. The broadcast was awesome. Snoop Dogg being the color commentator made it just insanely fun to watch. The post-game, the entire post-game was just something to behold. That was hilarious. And I think it's been kind of indicative of what bowl games have been trying to do across the country, frankly, because we've seen it now with the Pop-Tart Bowl kind of becoming this like sicko fan cult legend thing. I don't even know how to describe it, but college football fans have grown to love the Pop-Tart Bowl kind of out of nowhere. And the same with the Cheez-It Bowl. The Cheez-It Bowl had a wedding at halftime and had the Cheez-It dangling from the goalposts. Stuff like that is what bowl games should be about, especially outside of the college football playoff. So I was really happy to see Miami get this opportunity and kind of be able to showcase themselves in a national stage with none other than Snoop Dogg watching. Yeah,
absolutely. I think more bowls need to have these fun sponsorships. I know it's hard because you're gonna have the really random ones where it's like the ReliaQuest Bowl or the 68 Ventures Bowl, right? Where it's these kind of weird sponsors, but if you can make it fun for the people watching at home, they're gonna remember your brand, right?
Right.
It helps that there was a celebrity behind this one, and it helps that Cheez-Its and Pop-Tarts are things that every American household probably has in their pantry, but if other bowls can do stuff like that, it's going to make it more memorable and more impactful. The ReliaQuest Bowl, that used to be the Outback Bowl. They took away the Outback Bowl. They used to have a guy in a Bloomin' Onion costume running around the sidelines. If you remember the Michigan, South Carolina, the Jadeveon Clowney moment, that was the Outback Bowl. I remember that as an Outback Bowl. I don't remember that as it's now the ReliaQuest Bowl. Stuff like that. And the Frisco Bowl, something that Miami was a part of a couple of years ago, but now they have Scooter's Coffee as their sponsorship. They had two people in coffee mascots running around the field throwing coffee cups at each other. That's memorable. That's funny. That's what bowl games, exactly what you said, bowl games should aspire to be that way. And I will say the first half, I didn't really have a ton of fun watching the game because it was bad football. But like having Snoop Dogg in the booth was absolutely amazing. If it was broadcast on any other network besides the CW, I think I would have enjoyed it even more. But this is just a personal thing. I didn't like the color commentator. He talked way too much about himself. Mm-hmm. And then, the whole Tom Brenneman stuff, but that's besides the point. But having Snoop Dogg in the booth redeemed that booth because he was so funny. He was personable and he is so well spoken. He was talking about some of the guys that were a part of his youth football league that now play for Miami or play for Colorado State or play in the NFL. He's so eloquent. He's so well spoken. And he just added an absolute another layer to that broadcast, and he was so funny. He was so funny. I mean, Ty Wise had an interception. He goes, "That's a wise man right there."
Yeah, no, I was kind of nervous coming in that Snoop Dogg would kind of just not buy in and just kind of be there for the sake of being there because his team or his company decided to be a good PR move. But him being so invested and so locked into this game made it 10 times more fun to watch. Especially the clips of him before the game talking to the teams, him during the game interviewing Chuck Martin, which we'll get to in a second, and then post game riding in on a lowrider with Chuck Martin in the back seat. In what other bowl game, in what other universe does this happen? If you told me that was going to happen in August, I would have called you a crazy person. So I just thought the whole experience was really cool. And now we're going to debut our first news segment in a couple weeks. We're going to do the Arizona Bowl screenshot tier list, which I've put together via a free tier maker. There we go. We have it here on our screen. So we have 6 screenshots we're going to show. We're going to show each one on screen before we present. Oh, there we go. Now it's on screen. We're going to show each screenshot on the screen before we present, and then we will decide which ranking it's going to go into. I'm sure people have seen this on various other social media platforms. We are by far not the first people to do this idea, but we'll give it a try anyway. First things first, we're going to start off with the field. I think this was one of the best field designs for bowl game in recent history, in my personal opinion. This for me, this is either an A or a B for me. It's not S tier just because it is just a field design, but it's a really cool field design, so I think it deserves an A or a B.
I think it's definitely a B. I think there are other images that we'll get to that are definitely above just the field. But I mean, the field, absolutely gorgeous. It looked really good on TV too. That's another thing. You could have these really gorgeous fields, but if they look like crud on TV, people are going to remember they're going to look like crud. But I think that there are more and there are better screenshots that we can look at.
Yeah.
That deserve an S or an A.
Yeah. We'll put it in B for now. Now noticing a lot of mine are Chuck Martin related just because of the duality between Snoop Dogg and Chuck Martin. But we'll start with this one that was posted everywhere pre-game. It's the Chuck Martin meeting Snoop Dogg in the locker room. There's just so much to unpack here. The Snoop Dogg with the slanted hat and Arizona Bowl jacket compared to Chuck Martin with his glasses and very normal Miami pullover. Just the duality that these two had for the entire game was just so funny to watch. Especially after interacting with Chuck Martin and knowing that he's a pretty no nonsense serious guy. I just thought it was so funny.
It's so funny because it's it feels like meeting your daughter's boyfriend for the first time, where it's this very stern dad, and then the boyfriend's like, "What's up, pops? How we doing, man?" It just gives off that vibe for some reason. Maybe it's just because it's the slanted hat is throwing me for a loop, but I would love to know what was going through Chuck Martin's head when he's meeting Snoop Dogg. I would love to know. I think that's so funny. I'd probably give it an A.
Yeah, this goes an A for me. That's not the best screenshot I have of those two throughout the game, but it's still just so funny. So it has to go an A for me. We'll go to the Snoop cam next. the fact that they just had a Snoop cam going in the bottom left corner of the broadcast for the entire game, again, so funny, objectively hilarious. And again, like you said, he was really engaged in it. I forget, there was a couple of moments where he like said something like really, really funny. And we were at a watch party listening to it with pretty high game sound. We could hear pretty much everything he was saying. And I think at one point he said something like the Red Hawks are red hot. And the entire place just lost their minds. So Snoop Cam, obviously not as funny as some of the other ones, but just the fact that Snoop Dogg is commentating on a Miami, Ohio versus Colorado State football game in December just is still never not going to be funny to me.
I think the funniest part about Snoop commentating was he's a Steelers fan. So he's a big Ben Roethlisberger fan. So he knows a little bit about Miami, Ohio. He just knows about Ben Roethlisberger. So the whole game, he's, you know, the commentators are being like, oh, you know, if Gabbert throws for 4 touchdowns in this game and 500 yards, he breaks Roethlisberger's records or whatever, right? And Snoop is like, you know, if, you know, Miami, Ohio, you know, I hope Gabbert does well. I hope he does well, but I hope he rushes for like 4 touchdowns instead of throws for 4 touchdowns because I don't want him to break, you know, my boy Big Ben's records.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there cracking up because it's like, yeah, I mean, Gabbert is somebody I've watched now for 6 years. Like I want him to do well, but like objectively, it's funny that Snoop Dogg is like, he holds so much like weight to Ben Roethlisberger. And another thing that Snoop said at one point was, he goes, Gabbert, he goes, that last name's really familiar for me. And then the color commentator's like, well, yeah, his older brother Blaine was in the NFL. And then Snoop goes, oh yeah, 1st round pick by the Jacksonville Jaguars, 2-time Super Bowl champion, right? My mouth dropped. I was like, damn, Snoop knows ball.
Yeah. So, we're on the celebrities no ball train. At first Timothy Chalamet, now Snoop Dogg. Who's next? Next week we'll have one more. Yeah, I think for me, I'm putting this in. This is either A or B for me again.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably. I'd say it like the cam itself probably a B.
Yeah.
The stuff he provided definitely like AS, but like right. I think just the screenshots probably, or just the cam probably a B.
All right, we'll throw it in B for now, but it's above the and there we go. It's above the field designs. We'll go with that. Yeah. Let's move on to the halftime interview, which again, just courtesy of Dave Meyer on this picture, but just again, Snoop Dogg running the halftime interview with Coach Martin at half field at the Arizona Bowl. Just another like image that you just would not expect to see from Miami of Ohio football this year. But again, pretty cool screenshot. The halftime interview, I don't actually remember what was said during it, but the fact that he was running it was a cool touch.
Yeah. He actually asked a really, really good question. He, you know, because it was only 9-3 at halftime. So Snoop was like, you know, he's like, I talked to your defensive coordinator before the game, and he's, you know, he really hammered home, you know, the defense, and he started talking about the defense, and he's like, look, like, you know, your offense is not doing well. So like, what are you going to tell your guys in the locker room to, you know, kick them into gear and to get them going? And you could almost tell that like Martin was like almost like taken aback about like how good the question was. Because he cited his sources. He talked to the defensive and offensive coordinators. Like, you know, you don't necessarily hear interviewers being like, oh yeah, I talked to your coordinators. It's more like, hey, like, you know, watching the game, here's what's going on. But like Snoopy, you know, he talked to the coordinators, and this was a big thing on the broadcast. Is like Snoop showed up like 3 to 4 hours before the game to take pictures with every single member of the team, all the dance teams, all the cheerleaders, the band kids. Like anybody who wanted a photo, he got photos, he talked to people, and like that's what I think made this game so special for people is like Snoop wasn't just like, oh yeah, I'm Snoop Dogg, like I'm just gonna be here, do my own thing. It's like I'm gonna make sure I leave an impact on every single one of these people. And I think you can see that you can see it in the interview is like Martin, I think he really appreciated like it wasn't just a like, oh, you know, what are you going to change? Like what's going wrong? Right. It was like hey, this is a very well thought out question. Let me ask it to you. But again, the duality of like Chuck Martin in his traditional Miami, you know, sweater vest, and then Snoop with his do-rag and
Yeah, I think for me, this one like is teetering on like almost B C tier, just because like the screenshot itself isn't super like hilarious or like super indicative of like how cool it was. But like if you like watch the game, you know that this was a really cool moment.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'd say it's probably a C, just screenshot wise.
Yeah.
It's definitely one of those things where you're like, if I was tripping, this would be cool, but like I'm not. So
Yeah, and I also want to piggyback on what you said about like Snoop like taking like being super involved. It would have been one thing if like he showed up to the game and like sat in his box the entire time or like sat in like a corporate suite the entire time. But the fact he was like on the field doing the broadcast, doing the interviews, and then doing the ceremony at the end of the game, which I'll get to momentarily, was just really, really awesome. So credit to him for making that game. He took it to another level because the bowl itself would have been fun to like have the Snoop Dogg name behind it, but the fact that he was as involved as he was made it just even cooler than it could have been. So first, we're gonna go to this image, which is just like hang this in the Louvre. Seriously, like I don't. There's so much to take away from this picture. I don't even know where to start. But again, just before the season, a picture week 1 of this podcast. We're sitting here after the Northwestern game, talking about Miami's like chances this season. Was there any chance in your mind that this would have been the way the season ended?
no, I mean, like right before the UMass game, we were throwing a funeral for this team. I mean, essentially after the Toledo game, we were throwing a funeral. They were 1-4, and then they go on this incredible hot streak. I guess 1-3, right?
Toledo would have been 1-4.
No, yeah, 1-4. Yeah, they were 1-4, and they go on this incredible hot streak. And here we are watching this team finish, 4 games above 500, and it's like we get to celebrate with one of the coolest bowls ever.
Yeah. Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, the entire like ceremony with like Snoop coming out in the lowrider, but like was really cool. But I think just this image of Coach Martin riding away with Snoop Dogg in the lowrider is just going to do it. This is going to go triple platinum in my phone for memes for the next like 5 years. Like this is just the best picture I think I got from this game.
I just want to look at the two faces of Snoop and Coach Martin, because Snoop could not be happier. He's like loving this moment, and Martin is putting on one of those smiles where it's like, I'd rather be anywhere else.
Yeah, well, he said it in the post-game interview. Is like, I'm not a cool person. Like I did not belong in Snoop's lowrider. He was saying like, I'm not really sure what I'm supposed to do.
Yeah, I mean that is the perfect encapsulation. He's like he doesn't know what to do. Where do I put my hands? Like,
oh man, I mean this is S tier for me. This is the S tier one for me. This has
absolutely.
All right, I'm throwing that in S, but yeah, that is just the encapsulation of what made that game so awesome. And then we got one more here, and I know every one of these teams, every member of the Miami football team got this chain. But the only part of the broadcast they showed of getting the chain was Coach Martin getting his Death Row Records chain, which, again, just say that sentence out loud for me. Coach Martin wearing a Death Row Records chain.
Coach Martin wearing a Death Row Records chain. Oh, my gosh.
Like, that is so, I mean, first of all, really cool that every member of the team got a chain that said Death Row Records, courtesy of Snoop Dogg. That's sick. That's probably one of the best, like, bowl game like victory medals I've heard of or seen. So super cool, first of all. But again, just this screenshot of Snoop Dogg putting a chain on Coach Chuck Martin on national television. What?
You know what, Ohio, you can take your MAC championship rings, but we'll take our Death Row Records chains personally handed out by Snoop Dogg.
Yeah, I know which one I'd rather have. That's for sure.
Oh, 100%. I mean, yeah. This photo, like, it reminds me of the meme where it's like Obama putting on the medal of like the Freedom Medal, the Medal of Honor around himself.
Yeah.
But it's just like this is I feel like Snoop Dogg and Chuck Martin would be really good friends in a past life. But it's just so funny because I mean, like you said, Chuck Martin said that like he's not a cool person.
Yeah.
But this is like arguably one of the coolest things he's ever done.
Yeah, like I mean, It almost makes it better because it was Coach Martin.
Yeah.
Like if it was a different coach, if it was like, I don't know, like I'm trying to like it was like a younger coach, a guy who's like more in tune with like
Kenny Dillingham.
Yeah, thank you. I was blanking there, but yeah. Like that would have been like cool, but like not as monumental. This is just everything about it is just so cool, so like great for Miami's program, but also just so funny at the same time. So I mean, this again, this just has to be S tier for me. I don't know how else you could put it.
No argument here. S tier.
Yeah, S tier it has to be. So here is our final tier list. I will post it to the podcast site later on today. But yeah, Arizona Bowl, massive success. But let's talk about the actual game now. Let's talk about the actual substance of the football game. Miami obviously won 43-17. Couple quick things that I want to talk about before we start talking about some other stuff. First of all, like what a great way to go out for some of these seniors. I mean, we've talked so much about like this being their last ride, and obviously at points this season it was a little disappointing. We talked about the 1-4 start. We talked about the MAC championship loss to Ohio in pretty brutal fashion. This field felt like the perfect way to send this team off because it was a great team win. Everyone performed pretty much exactly how we expected to for the entire season. First of all, let's talk about Brett Gabbert. On paper, it did not look like the prettiest game for Gabbert. 13 for 25, 184 yards. But if you watch the game, he did exactly what he's done all season, which is spread the ball around, find the open man, complete the easy pass, and move the chains. That's all he's been asked to do, and that's what he's been good at for this Red Hawk team for the last 6 years. And he got rewarded for it. He got in the end zone, that little 10-yard run up the middle with the layup celebration. So he got rewarded for his performance, and it was good to see him end on a get himself in the end zone in his last game as a Red Hawk. That was cool to see.
Yeah, it was. I mean, it was the little 10-yard scamper that we can use it because he's been he's been in college for 6 years, but that was vintage Brett Gabbert. Like that's MAC Freshman of the Year Brett Gabbert, where he's able to use his legs and he's able to escape the pocket a little bit better than he has been in the last couple of years. So it was definitely really great to see. I would have liked to see him, get a passing touchdown. And there were a couple opportunities early in that game that he missed. And that was kind of where I was like, it was the first game. It was the first half, and I was like, man, Brett does not look comfortable. And I think part of that is like he didn't have all of his guys, right? He doesn't have Javon Trace. He didn't have Reggie Virgil. But like he still had Cade McDonald, he still had Jack Coldiron, but they weren't really involved in the offense all that much. Combined, we have it in our notes, 5 catches for 61 yards. It was nice to see them get the ball as a little senior tribute, but it started out rough, but whatever was said at halftime, I mean, absolutely just flipped the game on its head. And it's definitely nice to see those guys, leave here with a W.
Yeah, absolutely. Also, looking at, he threw to 8 different receivers. Like there was no clear number one. Obviously, Kay led the team with 3 catches as he has so many times this season. But another thing is they had short field a lot. So like the yardage didn't need to be a ton. He didn't need to throw for 300 yards. He didn't need to throw for 5 touchdowns. He did what he had to do because there were a couple times where the Red Hawks were starting inside the Colorado State 30. So all you have to do is kind of ground and pound. And you had Kevin Davis who broke out. I mean, I don't know how much he's been involved over the last couple of years. I'd have to go back and look. But if memory serves, this is his best game as a Red Hawk by far. I mean, 9 carries for 148 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's a video game line, not to mention the 81-yard kick return that he took almost to the house. I think it was in the third quarter. Like he set us up for great field position. He did exactly what he was asked to do. And obviously the 97-yard touchdown run was electric. So every part of Miami's offense was clicking, even if they were missing players. Like obviously Keon Mosey went down pretty early, obviously kind of struggled 8 rushes for 25 yards. No one else had more than 40 yards outside of Davis. And looking at receiving, the best receiver was Cam Perry at 57 yards. So short field kind of helped out a ton. And obviously the run game being as good as it was through Davis was huge. But all in all, like you don't put up 43 points by accident. So this offense did exactly what they had to do. And all in all, great team win and a good way to send out some of these offensive weapons that have been so key for Miami over the years.
Yeah, absolutely. Kevin Davis was the MVP of the game. Who expected that out of Kevin Davis? Especially, considering he was kind of, I don't want to say he was phased out of the offense, but I don't think we saw as much from him as we did last year, in terms of like production. But yeah, I mean, it was. I wish Keon Mosey the best. I think I think they gave him a concussion, is what they ruled him out of the game with. I mean, he hit his head really hard, so I hope he's doing all right. But yeah, Kevin Davis, I mean, holy, you want to talk about fast? I mean,
yeah,
97-yard touchdown, just, and I mean, here's the thing. Him and Gabbert were standing in the end zone. They were standing a yard or two in the end zone. So I know it's 97 by official metrics, but that was like 101, 102 yards realistically, because he got the ball like a yard in the end zone.
Yeah.
I mean, so, they can call it 97. I'm going to call it 102 because that was impressive.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Coach Martin said it after the game, like he ran track. He's a fast player. Like he said something like, if there's space and Kevin Davis can find it, he has a smile on his face because he's going to find that hole. He's going to break through. And you're right. He wasn't super involved. I remember him being more of like a passing back. Like he was more involved in like the flats in the receiving game more than he was in the run game, which kind of went to Kevin Davis and Jordan Brunson, or Keon Mosey and Jordan Brunson for most of the season. Also, Dylan Downing didn't play. I don't know if he was out or if he's in the portal or something, but I did not see anything on him before the game, but he was not involved. Jordan Brunson also, I want to talk about real quick. He'll hopefully be back next season. He's only a junior. He looks like he could be a huge power back for this football team. Like 11 yards, 34, or 11 carries for 34 yards and 2 touchdowns. Not great numbers, but in those short yardage situations, he was crucial. He was able to fight through and get those 1 to 2 yard gains, which especially in MAC play, which so many of those occur. That's going to be huge next season. I really hope he comes back and continues to perform for the Red Hawks, but we'll get to it in a second here. But there are some returners that stepped up for this Miami team that look like they could play a huge role next season.
Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, yeah, some of the returners that you alluded to there, Cam Perry, Cole Weaver, Braylon Isom or Ism. They on the broadcast they said it both ways, so I'm not sure. Apologies to Braylon. But yeah, we talked about Cole Weaver a little bit before the holiday break. He had 1 catch for 1 touchdown in the season, and we expect to see a much bigger role from him. And then Cam Perry is going to be that slot receiver next year, hopefully. Again, we say hopefully because the portal is all encompassing and it takes every little piece of talent that any small team has. So yeah, definitely hope to see more from them if they come back. Offensively, Josh Ringer, that's a guy we briefly talked about. I think he had a fumble in the game, but he had 2 carries and a catch. He's only a freshman, so definitely want to see more from him next year. But yeah, I mean that's the offense. Jack, let's start talking about the defense because that's going to be that's going to be the main point of emphasis this next season.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this defense is young. This defense is full of playmakers, and I think they showed it. I mean, you hold a really good Colorado State team who has put up pretty monster games to 3 points at halftime. Obviously, they got some points towards the end there, a flea flicker pass, and a couple nice drives towards the end. But by then, it was too late. They really stood on their heads in this game and really dominated in a way that we definitely did not see against Ohio and kind of saw towards the end of the MAC season. But I mean, how much can we talk about Matt Salopek and Ty Wise before their careers ended? And these are going to be 2 guys who are going to be so hard to replace for this MAC team or for this Miami team. 18 total tackles in a TFL. They are the captains of that defensive unit, and to not have them in the linebacking core is going to be a huge loss. And obviously, we'll talk about him more in a second, but Brian Ugu, 5 tackles, 1 TFL, declared for the NFL draft. That's a huge part of that defense that, again, is not going to be there next season. I mean, he was the main outside pressure. He was the guy creating pressure and forcing quarterbacks into throws they wouldn't normally make. So those are guys that need to be replaced. Obviously, the portal will help with that. The new recruiting class will help with that. And the guys we had that didn't play as much this year will have to step up and help with that. But you're talking about 3 guys who have been kind of the anchor of this defensive unit in the tackle box for the last couple of years. And the secondary, you're losing Rayon Strader now, you're losing Abe Caldwell now. You need guys to step up. We talked about Luke Evans last week. Tony Coleman Jr., freshman, had 6 tackles in the Colorado State game. He's going to need to step up. Oscar McWood's going to be a senior next year. He's going to need to step up. So there are players that are going to be able to step up for this team, but you're talking about losing guys who are quasi-captains or actual captains in the case of Salopek, and trying to replace their production after just one season is going to be a near impossible task.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. I really liked what I saw from Luke Evans this season. He did get a decent amount of playing time. And then I really liked what I saw from Tony Coleman Jr. They mentioned on the broadcast, like, this kid is going to be a stud. And I really hope that we get kind of 2 lockdown cornerbacks in Evans and Coleman Jr., because that would really help the defense, especially after they lose, the guys up the middle. This defense really is being picked apart. If you think about it, because you lose literally your top 7-8 performers from the year. So it'll be interesting to see how they fill these holes. Somebody who I do want to mention, he is Javon Hammonds. I've heard a lot of good press about this kid. And he's only a freshman, and I don't know how many games he played in this year. There's a very good chance he might he has a redshirt year. No, I'm incorrect. I'm stupid. Sorry. So he's going to be sophomore next year. But on the defensive line, I really see him filling that Brian Ugu role. He's 6'4", 240, so he's an inch taller than Ugu, a little bit lighter than Ugu, but I've heard a lot of good press around Javon Hammonds, so I think he really steps up next year too. We didn't have him in our notes, but I that's a guy to watch out for in my mind.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, he had a really good game against Notre Dame. He had 3 tackles and had 7 on the season, played in 5 games, had a brief appearance in the MAC championship. You're absolutely right. I think he could be a guy who kind of steps into that Ugu role. And I also think we have one guy in particular. We only have one guy coming in on defense in the portal, but you talk about having 2 lockdown corners. Coy Beasley's coming in from Purdue. So now you have Luke Evans, Coy Beasley, and Tony Coleman, who are all young, are going to be redshirt freshmen or sophomores. That's your secondary for the next 3 or 4 years. And then you have guys like Oscar McWood, who can kind of play that nickel dime role kind of in the middle and take away that over the middle pass. That's your pass defense next year. So there are pieces who are going to be able to step up and kind of fill the holes that have been left on this defense. I'm more concerned about the interior of the D-line, and I'm more concerned about the linebacking core than I am about the secondary. But there are guys that I think can step up. Grant Lyons is a guy that got playing time in the bowl game. Devin Johnson, I think, had a couple tackles he had 2 tackles, and he's a DB, excuse me. But again, we have these guys who can step up and fill these roles, even if we're losing players. So I do think, it's been 3 or 4 years now of a good Miami defense. So there is a track record of being able to recreate the production, even if it's not on the exact same level. But yeah, I think you're absolutely right. You are losing probably 70% of your defensive production next season.
Yeah, there are a couple of guys I want to point out. Nasir Washington's a redshirt junior. He may come back next year. I know he got hurt towards the end of the season. I think there's one of the photos that's up on Instagram. He's in a sling, so I think he got some sort of surgery. So I'd love to see him come back because he played a really vital role, and he would be a really steady force up the middle. So I'd love for him to come back. Like you said, Josh Lakusa, I hope that he is able to step up. There are a couple guys in here that I'm looking at. Oyeka Alexander, he's just big, so they may start throwing him at nose tackle and see what happens. There was another name. I'm gonna butcher his last name, but it's Eli Shereshevich the fourth. This guy looks like an athletic freak. He's 6'5", 280 pounds. I don't know what they're gonna do with him, if anything, but like he seems like some sort of athletic freak that needs to get on the field somehow. And then the one name that is percolating defensive line, freshman Devin Bell. He's from Archbishop Hoban, which is where Matt Solopek is from. So there is pedigree there. But we still have Corbin Hondrew. Hopefully he's a redshirt junior. Adam Trick, who is your guy throughout most of the year. He's coming back. He's a redshirt sophomore. Again, I say coming back, and all of these are knocking on wood. Eli Kopis is a guy that I've also heard some pretty good press around. Christian McKinney. Christian McKinney, if he gets a chance to show out in training camp this summer, I would not be surprised if Christian McKinney is starting for us next season. This is a kid who is really high. People are really high on this kid from what I've heard. So if that's my star of camp, I'll stamp it there. Christian McKinney is going to be the star of camp.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. There's a bunch of guys here: Brock Rice, Grant Lyons, Carter Harriman. But I think you're right. I think Christian McKinney is a guy I've heard a lot about. And so I think you're absolutely right that if he gets a chance in camp, that he's a guy who's going to break out. So let's move on. Let's talk a little bit about Brian Ugu. Obviously, the other day announced that he was going to the NFL draft. Miami players haven't had, the best pedigree of being drafted. So I think any draft pick is a good draft pick for Miami. Pro Football Focus doesn't love him, according to their website. He's ranked as the number 278 prospect and is currently the only Miami player listed. Granted, they only have 4 MAC players listed total. So I think they just don't really respect the MAC. But, I mean, his stats kind of speak for themselves. It's like, 14 and a half TFL, 7.5 sacks, I think around 50 tackles. Like he was the best defensive edge that Miami had this season by a wide margin, and proved that he can go against like some of those bigger teams. Like he performed well against Notre Dame, if memory serves, performed well against Cincinnati, and was kind of a wrecking ball in the MAC. So the film is out there. The stats are there. The build is there. I could see him being a late round flyer for a team, like a late round project for a team desperate for edge help. I can't see him being a huge riser. I don't really see him going in like the top 4 rounds, but who knows? A good combine, some good pro days, and that could be a late round steal. That could be a second, third, or a third or fourth string edge for a team that needs edge help.
Yeah, so you mentioned it. Miami doesn't have a great track record of players getting drafted, especially like defensive players for some reason. The 2 names that immediately come to mind are Dominique Robinson and Quentin Rollins. And I can't even remember if Quentin Rollins was drafted, but shout out Quentin Rollins, 2-sport Miami athlete, basketball and football. But anyways, Dominique Robinson, last guy to get drafted out of Miami, unless you count Ivan Pace Jr., but he technically graduated from Cincinnati. But I just want to compare their stats quickly. So for their Miami careers, they both played 2 years at Miami, although Robinson was a quarterback, then wide receiver, and then D lineman, which is just shout out incredible. He in his 2 years, and he had a shortened season in 2020, so I'll give him that. But 38 tackles, 11 tackles for loss, and 3.5 sacks. Ugu, 164 tackles, or total tackles, 37.5 tackles for loss, and 20.5 sacks. That is up there for the lead in the MAC in terms. I'm pretty sure. I'll have to look this up quickly because I don't want to say something that's wrong, but Ugu's up there. I don't think he's. I think you're right. I don't think he's a first 4 rounds guy. But I wouldn't be surprised if a team takes a chance on him early 5th round or late 5th round, and then he kind of he's got to have a good combine for sure or a good pro day. But but I don't know. I'm really high on Brian Ugu. Like I'm really high on Brian Ugu. I really hope he gets drafted. Jack, I think you're muted because I can't hear you.
Sure was. Ugu finished third in the MAC with 8 sacks behind Kobe Stewart and Bradley Weaver. I don't have TFLs here, but I think Fox Sports gave him credit for an extra half a sack. So maybe that's a little inflated. I think you're absolutely right. Like, he has the pedigree, he has the talent. I think it's just a matter of, like, do teams respect the MAC right now? And I mean, the highest rated guy from the MAC on that side is Harold Fannin Jr., who was literally one of the best offensive players in college football this year, and they still have him at pick 80. If Harold Fannin Jr. played for Alabama, he'd be a top 10 pick.
Oh, 100%.
What are we doing? Yeah, so what are we doing here? So I think there's a little bit of kind of MAC, not anti-bias, if that. Like, I think that they don't really respect some of the talent coming out of this league, even though, as proven last year with Quinyon Mitchell, these guys are capable of being first-round picks. So maybe these guys fly up the board a little bit. Again, we're 4 months away from the draft, so a lot can happen in 4 months. But there are some other Miami players who I think could kind of find their way onto NFL rosters in one way or another. Brett Gabbert, I think, is one. Why not add a guy with 6 years of college football experience to your roster? Be a, third or fourth string guy coming out of camp. Maybe he sticks on a roster spot. Maybe he lands as a third string somewhere. He's an experienced player, and frankly, he has the name pedigree. His brother played in the NFL for a long time, so I think he gets a practice squad shot, especially with a team like Cincinnati or Cleveland in the Ohio area. And I could definitely see him making a roster out of camp with a strong camp, especially because of how much experience he has in the quarterback position and playing against some really high level competition. And even though he is, 24 and will be at the time of the draft, he's missed a ton of time due to injury. So he probably will have the freshness or the muscle fatigue of a 22-year-old because of how many games he's missed, despite the obvious. You do have to take into account the injury concerns, but as a undrafted free agent, why not take a flyer on a guy like Gabbert, who's an experienced signal caller for a really good football team?
Yeah, and I think the thing with Gabbert is, like, his 3 injuries were all pretty freak injuries. It's not like it's the same recurring injury. Like, his knee got blown up against Toledo. Like, that is a freak injury of freak injuries. I mean, and then they didn't even think he was going to walk after the injury. And then look what happened. And then the game against Kentucky where he had the upper body injury. I mean, it doesn't help when you have a 400-pound man, falling on top of you.
Yeah.
And then he had like that vertebrae or like the neck or concussion issue in the COVID year against Ball State. Like, I mean, those things happen, right? Like that. Right. That's just football. I mean, like literally any NFL player can tell you how many concussions they've had on probably multiple hands.
Right.
So I think you're right. I think he probably has like a Jack Sorensen type of vibe where he like gets picked up by a local team. Maybe even finds his way down to Indianapolis. Because I mean, Indianapolis's quarterback situation is a mess.
Yep.
So I wouldn't, I wouldn't be surprised if his name probably gets him a spot. But yeah, and then we'll kind of zoom past this because we do want to talk about the other two sports. But Salopek, you said late round flyer. What are you thinking there?
I mean, he's proven that he can be a solid defensive player. He's a solid linebacker. Obviously, the age kind of takes away from what his ceiling is because, I mean, he's got some wear and tear from being in college football so long. But I think for a team that looks kind of needs to add a veteran leader or needs to add, a guy with experience that doesn't want to take a flyer on a project and kind of needs an instant guy to step in and make plays, why not take Salopek in like the 6th or 7th round and, throw him in there at a linebacker position and see what he can do? It's a low risk, high reward kind of play. He has the track record. He's been the captain of this defense for 2 years now. And both of those defenses have been one of the best, if not the best in the MAC, if not probably top 30 to 40 in the country statistically.
Yeah.
It's a low risk play for me. I mean, obviously he's not a lottery pick. You know what you're getting with him. He's going to be a very solid tackler, pretty mobile in the run game, not the best in pass coverage, but you know what you get with him. He's a guy who can stop the run. He's a guy who can stop tackles on the outside. So if a team needs a guy to step in and instantly make plays in the back half of the draft, that's a guy I'm looking at. It's a guy that's probably pretty underrated right now. And even if he falls out of the draft, if a team picks him up on an undrafted contract, who knows what happens in camp? I mean, injuries happen, especially at the linebacker position.
Oh yeah.
So
I mean, that's how Ivan Pace got his shot.
Exactly. So I'm not expecting him to be a top 4-round pick, but 6th, 7th round, if a team like Buffalo or Kansas City is like, we need a guy who can step in right now and play the linebacker position, and we don't want to have to develop him, why not take a flyer on a guy like Salopek?
Yeah, no, I like that. We also have Ty Wise in here. Too big to be a middle linebacker, not fast enough to be an outside linebacker. You probably just stick him on the edge, right?
That's kind of what I'm thinking. He has the size to be an edge, maybe an undersized edge, maybe even almost like a speed guy off the edge. If you have a bigger guy, if he's lined up outside of a bigger guy, you can kind of sneak through a gap. But yeah, I mean, he's not fast enough to be an outside linebacker. He's not going to be an NFL level player in pass coverage. He's good in the run game. So I think he lands somewhere for camp, and then again, kind of reliant on how other things work out for him to get a shot. But those are the 3 guys on Miami's roster right now I could see from this class going into the draft. Because like obviously guys like Rayon Strader could go in a couple of years. Javon Tracy could go in a couple of years. And like, who knows about some of these guys we have like sophomores and freshmen on Miami's roster down the line. And obviously it's too early to say for them, but out of who is currently on Miami's roster and who has been here for a while, those are the 3 guys I think could have a shot at the NFL.
Colby Borders also signed with an agency that like it literally is like a prepare for the draft agency. Mm-hmm. So I'll throw him in there. He could also be a guy that you probably take, and I would say it depends. I'd probably say like anywhere from 3 to 7, 4 to 7.
Yeah, I think 4 would probably be his ceiling for me, just because of how many good offensive tackles there are in the draft this year, especially kind of in that middle tier. There isn't a Joe Alt at the top of the draft. So no one's using their draft capital early on an offensive tackle. So I think that 3 to 4 to 5 range is where a lot of teams are going to try and address OT. So then if you have a guy that, if you think Colby Borders is your guy, I could definitely see a team that's trying to be savvy, take him in round 4.
Yeah, I mean, sorry.
No, you're good.
I like Borders because he's played everywhere on the line, right? He played center. I think he started at center. I don't know if he ever got the tackle, but he's definitely an interior O-line type of guy. So I could see a team that really struggles with offensive line, the Giants, taking a flyer on a guy who was on an incredibly solid, offensive line for a really long time.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I mean, you're talking to 2 guys who need offensive line right now between the Giants and the Bears. So I would love to have a Colby Borders type on my roster, but
yeah,
that's neither here nor there. Let's move on because I know we're short on time to talk about the 2 basketball teams before we get on out of here. We'll start with the women's basketball. Their game was a lot more competitive than the men's basketball team, so we'll start with them. Opened up their MAC play to start the new year. Tough home loss to Ball State. It was closer than the scoreboard made it look. I think they were within like 2 points in the second half there for a while, but they're outscored in every quarter. And it's the same thing we talk about pretty much every week when we talk about this team. 24 turnovers. Pretty hard to win basketball games when you're turning the ball over 24 times, especially in a conference like the MAC where possessions come at a premium. But yeah, I mean, that's the story of the game right there. Turnovers, and because they shot the ball better than Ball State did in pretty much every aspect. And, the scoring output was there from their players. So it's the turnovers. That's the story of the game once again.
Yeah. You don't really want your primary ball handlers and Angelina Gonzalez and Maya Chandler combining for 11 turnovers. Those are the 2 people that are really handling the ball a lot, along with Tamar Singer. You can't have that. You're not going to win basketball games like that. And you're not going to win basketball games allowing anybody to shoot 70% from the floor. Ali Becky, a complete game, 22 points, 70% shooting, 9 boards, 7 assists. I mean,
yeah, you can win games like that if you take away everything else. Yeah. And they didn't, because Grace Kingery also had 18 points on 5 threes.
Yeah.
So you have two players in that kind of scoring form. It's going to be really tough to win ball games. So Miami's main scoring threats did perform pretty well. Angelina Gonzalez added another 15. Amber Treader had 13 and 6, and Maya Chandler had 10. But again, you can allow one player to beat you if you take away every other player, and that's not what happened. So it was a tough game from the start.
Absolutely, yeah. It's one of those games where it's like, all right, it's early in MAC play. You're still trying to feel out your MAC opponents, and it stinks to drop one, but this women's team is going to turn it around for sure. Like they're going to be a top 5 seed, I think, because this is probably one of their best, if not deepest teams that they've had in a really long time. They don't have like one star; they have multiple stars, right? You got Gonzalez, you got Treader. It's not just like Peyton Scott save us or Ivy Wolf save us,
right? And like the shooting numbers look good. I mean, 40, 90. That's something to build on, at least there. I mean, if you limit the turnovers, that completely changes the ball game.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
There are signs that this team will turn it around, and I mean, who knows how good Ball State will be this year? Because I mean, I can't say I've watched too much of their team this year, but it's one game in MAC play, long way to go. But there are signs that this team will be better than what they showed on New Year's Day. Before we get on out of here, let's talk really briefly about the Miami of Ohio versus Defiance game, which I watched from home. Set the program record in points with 141, which I think is the most points I've ever seen scored in a college football or college basketball game, excuse me. Never really a doubt. I mean, they were up 30 within like 5-10 minutes of this game starting. 71% from the field, 62% from three on 35 3-pointers. That's a recipe for success. Obviously, the opponent is not really indicative of their talent level this season or their competition level this season, but that's really, really impressive.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're scoring 141 points against any team, like it's pretty impressive. You don't really want to take away from anybody. So there's not really too much you can take from this game because it is, Defiance is an NAIA school. But it's nice to see the guys like roll in and get hot. But yeah, you have it here. A couple guys with some career and season highs in points. Micaiah Cooper, career high. Evan Ipsaro, a season high. He was one off of his career high. Dan Lewers is Miami high, but fun fact, not his career high. He scored 23 at Eastern Illinois, and then he scored 26 or 25 when he was at Defiance College. So he had a little extra motivation going into this game. And then Luke Skaljak, he had a career high in points with 16, I think.
Yeah. I mean, really good game from Skaljak. And again, like we've talked about him a ton. He's going to be a really good player for this team. Really coming on as a freshman. I mean, 16 points, 3 steals, 4 assists on 1 turnover. As a freshman, even competition excluded, like just looking at it from a player perspective, that is about as good of a stat line as you can ask for from a freshman playing in their 12th career college game. So, I mean, he's going to be a huge part of if this team's successful in the MAC. I'm really excited to see what he can do going forward. But, I mean, there's a ton of players that really came on in this game that really kind of stepped up. I mean, obviously, Brant Byers didn't have his best shooting performance, but he actually did 75%. I was looking at the rebounds there. 8 points. I mean, he had, 20 or close to 20 in the Bethany game. He's stepping up. And, like, obviously, we can talk about Cam Kraft, Peter Suter, Ian Elmer. Like, these guys are going to be the stars of this team. But I think what will take this team to the next level and put them in contention for the MAC title is this depth that they have off the bench. And these guys have now proven that they can provide that spark scoring-wise, which was my main concern coming into the season.
Yeah, it's nice to see like your top 3 guys score the way that you want them to, because I think I'm trying to pull up the stats right now. I think it was like Elmer, Kraft, and Suter all finished in double digits. Kraft. Oh no, I'm sorry. It was Kraft, Cooper, and Suter. They all finished in double digits, so that's always really nice to see. But then, yeah, like you said, it's nice to get a lot of contributions off the bench, and this team's depth will take them pretty far. This is a really, really deep team. They can run 9-man deep, 10-man deep, really, if they need to. And they tend to run 10-man deep, if I'm not mistaken, because they play Byers consistently. They play Potter consistently, Ipsaro, Skulljack. I guess they play about 9 deep. But yeah, this is going to be a really fun MAC team to watch. And then they got a game on Saturday coming up at 1 p.m., which either Jack or I will be live tweeting, one of the two. But ESPN gives us a 95% chance. I don't know if you can see the circle there. Yep. 95% chance of winning. But it's the MAC. Anything can happen in the MAC. That's the beauty of it. But yeah, I'm really excited to see Miami kind of come out and hopefully, knock on wood, get a MAC win to start the year.
Yeah, agreed. One of us will have the coverage for that. We'll keep you posted on that. And then one of us, or hopefully I will be back in Oxford to cover the January 11th game against Western Michigan at home. Still working out the travel details there. So if that changes, I'll let you know, but we'll still have coverage of that nonetheless. But we are out of time once again. Ted, thank you so much for joining me once again. Hope you enjoyed your holidays. And we are in for a 2025 with a lot of hope for these basketball teams.
Yeah, absolutely. It's things are looking up for the basketball programs, which is something we haven't really said in a while. So I'm really excited for both these teams.
All right. Well, we wish everyone listening a very Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, and Happy New Year. We will see you all next Thursday at the same bad time and same bad channel. Hope everyone has a good week. See you next week.